Hello and welcome to Florida Basketball Hour. I am Neil Blackman, Saturday Down South. On this episode, we will break down Florida's 177 demolition of Alabama Sunday in the O'Connell Center. The Gators beat them anyway, just like Todd Golden said that they would. Charles Bediako, of course, played. He was purely and utterly outclassed by Ruben Chinyelu. We will get into that for sure. An incredible week for the Gators here as we break that down on Florida Basketball Hour, part of the Stadium and Gale Network. The Gators rebound from a disappointing loss at home to Auburn, where Florida did not compete at the level that I think we're accustomed to really the last 3 years under Todd Golden. Like, the one thing you could say about Todd Golden's, you can say a lot of things about Todd Golden's last 3 teams, but I think the one thing that is universally true is that Florida does not get outcompeted or outworked, with maybe the exception of Missouri a year ago, the first half of the Georgia game a year ago, and probably, the Auburn game this season. I actually think Florida, in each of their non-conference losses, competed at a pretty high level. I mean, Florida, you could make an argument they didn't defend it at the level that they're capable of against TCU. Really, I think TCU just found some actions that were working, and Florida couldn't stop them. But neither here nor there. Like, the level of we got outworked and out-hustled losses is so small under this program. So it was a cultural win for Auburn, which is impressive. Florida had done that to them up at Neville the year before. The Gators have Auburn return the favor in their building, only their third home loss in the last 3 years for Florida. And to come back and go on the road at South Carolina on a just bitterly cold evening in Columbia, go into Colonial Life and win 95-48. So we got to talk about South Carolina a little on this podcast too. Was just utterly ridiculous in terms of how Florida responded to adversity, right? And that game was interesting to me because it was a game where Florida had a ton of balance. You had 5 guys in double figures scoring. From a scoring standpoint, obviously Chinyelu with 14 points and 11 rebounds, his 12th double-double of the year against the Gamecocks. But Florida matches the largest SEC win in program history. They get the largest road win in SEC play in program history. They get nearly a triple-double from Alex Condon, who finished with 10 points, 9 rebounds, and 8 assists. He also had 2 blocks. He was just tremendous. And the adjustment that Florida made for Condon, who I think just had a bad game against Auburn, may have been dealing with an illness. Alex is not somebody who's going to make excuses for that. But, just the 1 point, 9 rebound, 4 turnover game in 37 minutes against Auburn. Credit Kashawn Murphy, too. Like, I don't want to take stuff away from other kids too much. And I really think some of Condon's problems in that game are a testament to how well Stephen Pearl had a plan and how well Auburn executed it, right? A lot of that is about them. But for Alex to come back and nearly post a triple-double, especially on a night where, like, his first 2 shots were good mid-post isolation looks where he beat a guy off the dribble and then didn't make a shot. Like, it went in and out. And I think people got frustrated. Obviously, he threw a backboard 3 up. But by then, Florida was up 30-something points. So Alex only shoots 3 of 8 from the field, but still nearly has a triple-double. And the adjustment that Florida made was in the Auburn game, Florida ran a lot of their horns looks through Condon like usual, and a lot of their horn, what you call sort of gut dribble handoff actions, zoom actions, where Condon is high. He was high above the 3-point line. And not only did Auburn not respect Condon to shoot, but they also sagged off those reads so that, like, they sort of diffused the action off the touch, because we're going to tag whoever the roll guy is and let Condon, have the ball by himself up there and figure out what to do. And so Florida's adjustment to that against South Carolina was, we're just going to get the ball to him lower. And, that worked, quite honestly. I mean, Alex was able to. He's so good at the elbow and in mid post. He's 1.27 points per possession. Florida is when Condon gets the ball mid post isolation. That's great. I think when you look at his heat map, I mean he's still 52.9%, 4 to 6 feet from the rim, and then as you get closer, it's just pretty automatic. But in mid post isolation, Alex has only one cold spot, and that's like sort of the 14-foot floater that he'll sometimes take. He's only shooting 20%, 1 of 5 on those. So he doesn't take that very much. But, Alex gets 42.4% of his shots in the painted area. And he's incredibly efficient both as a passer and as a scorer inside that painted area. And that's why like his 2-point assist rate is very high, right? And Florida's points per possession when he touches the ball in there is very high. So I think like making sure that he has those deep touches is really critical because you have to guard him in that space because he makes those shots. And so then the stuff that Florida runs for their cutters, or Florida's big to big because Condon's such a good big to big passer, whether, he's passing overhand or underhand or, even on bounce passes. Like Alex is just great passing the ball. And once he commands help, forget about it because he's going to make the read properly almost all the time. And look, I mean, South Carolina had productive games from their bigs. Elijah Strong had some really good games for them. They didn't play Christos Ndako very much, but that when they did play him, it was him and Hayden Asamian and those guys in the first half as Florida stretched the lead, and Condon was just piling up assists and making good read after good read. Only the 2 turnovers for him in that game. Obviously, he had none in the next game, but the story of the South Carolina game largely was that Alex Condon was awesome. And then, just the efficiency of Tommy Houck, who continues to play like a guy who should potentially be SEC Player of the Year, 7 of 12 from the field, 18 points to lead the Gators. It felt like early when Florida was struggling to score, the answers were Tommy Houck, get him the ball, let him make a play, or Urban Clavsar, who obviously banged in 3 threes, but the 2 in a row kind of loosened Florida up. Alex Condon told me after the game he's Florida's X factor, and that's how the Gators were able to get loose. And then, of course, Chenyelu just bouncing back from the Auburn game himself, 7 of 7 from the floor. You cannot get more efficient than that. Ruben had 3 turnovers actually against the Gamecocks. I felt like, 2 of those, the game was really well out of hand. It's just worth noting because he's been so good at not turning the ball over really since San Diego when he had kind of 7 turnovers and it was a little ugly out there. He's only had 3 turnovers or more in SEC play one other time, and that was in Florida's win at Vanderbilt when he was KenPom MVP. So you kind of lived with what happened. But, just a tremendous performance by the Gators. Obviously, it was nice to see Alex Lloyd bury a 3 at the end of the South Carolina game. The ball looks so pretty coming off his hand. I think the future is bright for Florida's 2 freshmen. Even though they're not going to play a significant role at all this season, it's good to see that happen. But Florida, again, Xavier Lee plays 27 minutes, so he's pretty productive in this game, and Urban plays 20. And then the minute shift and high leverage minutes in the Alabama game are a little bit different, where Lee still pretty good, and I'm going to talk about that. But obviously Clavsar is the guy who gets 27 minutes, and Irby gets 17. So Florida is playing leverage minutes with their other starting guard spot. It's not necessarily just Xavier Lee and then Urban off the bench. It's Urban off the bench. Florida's not going to change the starting lineup. I know people have said when's Clavsar going to start, when's Clavsar. They're not. Todd's going to play high leverage minutes to Irby. in these big games when they're close, and that's what happened on Sunday against Auburn. So Alabama. So obviously the buildup to this game, I wrote about the Bediako stuff at my law firm, Sandberg Phoenix, at that website. We have an NIL practice group that I run there. So it's newsworthy to them and us as lawyers. I wrote about it at Saturday Down South and sort of the basketball aspect of thing. You can check out that article. But I think that Todd Golden's comments that are true, that they were able to finagle sort of a state judge to say, hey, let him play now, even though that NCAA rule in question is crystal clear and has existed for years, that if you stay in the draft beyond the deadline, you forfeit your remaining eligibility as a collegian once you've played college basketball. That's distinct from Nanaje, who never played college basketball and never signed an NBA contract, by the way. But I think the NCAA's best argument is the prior eligibility rule has always existed, and Bediako had access to NIL opportunities prior to making his decisions. And to the extent that Heitner, who's great lawyer, and his team argue NIL opportunities are different now, they could make that argument with like the House settlement. But in terms of, there's more NIL available, that is not a compelling legal argument in terms of Bediako. Like, international players were getting plenty of NIL when Bediako left. And to the extent that Bediako did not have access to that, that's because Alabama's NIL collective was not robust enough to solve that problem. And that is not an NCAA issue. That's a market side issue. So, that aspect of things I thought was super fascinating in the build-up to this game because it led to Golden saying, we'll beat them anyway. And then it led to Nate Oates making comments about, Florida having bigs that stay 6 seconds, 7 seconds, 8 seconds in the paint. And obviously Todd gets his revenge on that kind of beautifully. We'll get to that in a minute. But the building was jumping. It was jumping from the beginning of the game. An incredible environment in the O'Connell Center on Sunday. Building was filled to the rafters, obviously a sellout, ton of orange and blue too. Not a lot of Alabama fans in the building. Credit to you Gator fans for buying the tickets and then showing up as opposed to reselling them. I think there's a lot of different ways we could kind of address this game. You have to start with Ruben Chinyalu, who does outclass Bediako. Bediako 6.7 rebounds, fouls out. Ruben, 14 points, 17 rebounds, second best plus minus on the team behind Boogie, who was plus 32, which is preposterous. We'll get to him in a second. Ruben is going to win Defensive Player of the Year in the SEC. I think he was probably going to win it anyway, but obviously, the possession, everybody knows the one I'm referring to at the end of the first half, where Alabama gets a switch and Boogie stays on Phylon, keeps him in front, moves his feet, keeps his hands up. Did not think there was a hand check foul. Maybe on Reitzel there was a hand check that they could have potentially called once. They didn't call it, so not a foul. I thought he did a great job there defending without fouling, moving his feet. When they got the second switch on Reitzel, I was thinking, man, Rube's got to be tired. And to keep Reitzel in front of him too. And then Reitzel tried the step back, and Rube guarded that perfectly, never left his feet. And then Hauck goes nuts on the bench. The building went absolutely bonkers. And that was such a huge possession, right? Because here's Florida up by 5 points late in the first half, or up by 8 points, late in the first half. And Florida, Alabama's got a chance to cut into that, make it a 6 or a 5 point game. And Florida shuts the water off there. And I think that one possession carried over. Like, Florida took that into the locker room and then obviously came out with the kill shot right out of the gate. They had 2 kill shots in this game. They lead the SEC in those. And that was big time, like, just difference making, stuff from an emotional standpoint, from a statement standpoint, from a postseason award standpoint, and it shows the way that Chenyalu has improved. I mean, look, he was a guy you could attack in a switch last year. We're plain and simple. I mean, to the point where North Carolina did it over and over and over again in Charlotte in the second half, where they would get Seth Trimble or Ian Jackson in a switch and just go right at Chenyalu or Hauk. And, you know, where he's come from that cold December night in Charlotte to now is pretty remarkable. And now where he's outstanding as a pick and roll defender. Like, Alabama went right to that. Let's attack Florida's drop coverage in the first half and get Bediako going on the pick and roll. And he like threw one off the backboard very early. The Chenyalu gobbled up. And Condon gets the rebound. And it was like that was a statement possession that kind of you go, Alabama's not going to live on the Bediako pick and rolls, you know, that made them so dangerous the Brandon Miller year, and that I thought they were getting back. And you know, obviously he has, and that's such a difference for Florida too, because like the flaw on the Tyrese Samuel team for the Gators, right, was that like Zion Pullen wasn't really a good enough defender on the perimeter and to slow guards who were electric, and then Tyrese Samuel would get killed in the pick and roll over and over. And so like that Florida team's ceiling was limited because they couldn't guard one particular action. And Florida has fixed that, obviously, to winning the national championship. Elijah Martin kind of the centerpiece of that, but Rubin getting better last year, and Condon being just a stalwart defender since he's arrived at Florida. Hauk improving. But Chenyalu anchoring what I think is a team that's getting to a defensive identity. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then offensively, he's improved. I mean, it's just clinical with the left. When he gets the left shoulder facing the basket, he is clinical. That hook is going to go down. And, you know, I know he was 4 of 12 in this game. Actually kind of his worst 2-point performance. But he's 6 of 7 from a free throw standpoint. And he was still 11 of 19 from the field in the 2 games, South Carolina and Alabama. And it was enough for him to be named Naismith National Player of the Week. Really well-deserved. I think he's playing himself into the National Defensive Player of the Year conversation as well. I think Fiore Badunga, Joshua Jefferson of Iowa State, Joe Tugler at Houston are kind of the other guys that are centerpieces of that conversation. Cam Boozer should be, but isn't, I guess, because he's going to win a bunch of other stuff. But he's Duke's best defender too, and he leads the nation in defensive win shares. But you know, Chenyalu, interestingly, is second on Florida in defensive win shares. Alex Condon is first, but that tells you like Florida's plan was let's switch 1 to 5, and if you're going to switch 1 to 5, like there's a couple things that have to happen. First, your bigs have to be able to. You do it against Alabama, where they've got an All-American guard like LeBaron Philon, and then a bunch of other all-league worthy type players at guard, Reitzel and Holloway. You better be able to have your bigs stay in front, and that happened. Amari Allen was eligible in this game. Another one that like a wing it's hard to switch on him. And then, you know, your guards better make it hard to screen so you don't have to switch all the time when you're switching 1 to 5. Because if you refuse to get screened, you don't need to switch, right? And then your guards better be able to front too, right? And Boogie Flan and Xavier Lee were so good at playing big in this game. Like Xavier won one-on-one defensive plays against the likes of Aiden Sherrill and Amari Allen multiple times in this game, and Irby Clavsar competed, Zay Brown competed in that front too. You know, but I thought those two, Lee and Flan, were just excellent at fronting and trusting that if they got a mismatch in the post, like there would be help for them, and they just kind of had to hold their ground. And really to that point, like Flan in those matchups, like he would recognize the opportunity to switch back And he got 2 steals in strong side help, which, oftentimes they're like, you can't help strong side because you'll give up an open 3. That's kind of a mentality in basketball that's been around forever, and it's often right. But Flan does a great job of recognizing spacing and where people are on the floor in real time, which is hard. And so when Alabama's drivers got deep, Flan realized hey, if I help here, this is a very hard pass to the corner. It's a hard pass for an open 3. And he came up with 2 steals and strong side help, 2 to give Florida transition opportunities. Florida turns Alabama, a team that came into the game top 10 nationally in limiting turnovers. They turned them over 18 times. 13 of those were live ball turnovers, so they were loud. Florida gets 25 points off those turnovers. That's pretty spectacular stuff by the Gators. I think the Gators have embraced, and Fawcett talked about this on Patreon, patreon.com/FloridaBBR. Make sure you guys check out all our work over there. It's the best way to support Florida Basketball Hour is to support the Patreon, patreon.com/FloridaBBR. Memberships begin at $3 a month, I think, and you for $6 a month you can get everything. And I think our 6-man club members will tell you that it's worth it. But that's the best way to support us. Game Time Sidekicks really our lone sponsor right now for the pod. So, all of this we do for you on our time. And we appreciate everyone that has contributed and joined the Patreon because you're getting incredible content. You're not, and Florida has some great basketball writers. Graham Hall does an awesome job. Zach Albarviti has done a really good job this year. I think those guys are out there. And there's others, Andrew Abatey, Kevin Brock, them all. But Mark Long, these guys do a good job. We're giving you content you're not getting from them, and some of that is a result of our medium, but it's worth the subscription for your game previews, your exclusives, your post-game breakdowns. It's all there. So Todd Golden has said really since November that Florida's their path to potentially reaching their ceiling, to getting back to the Final Four, which I now believe this team can do, and I haven't been there until Sunday. It's embracing a defensive identity. And I think the Gators have finally done that. And Tommy Houck has talked about we got to be gritty. We got to be a team that defends first. And Boogie Flan has talked about it. But to talk about it and then go do it 2 games in a row like they have done this week, it just shows me that they're getting at it. And Boogie Flan's been at the center of it. He had 15 points, 8 assists, 8 steals. 8 steals in an SEC basketball game against a top 5 national offense. It's, Boogie gives you the ability to guard in so many ways. He's great on the ball. He can pressure him and prevent you from initiating offense. He jumps passing lanes. He's had 6 games with pick sixes. This year he had 2 against Alabama, one of which, with Florida leading 16-13, was a stupendous play because Alabama tried to get him out of the play in a switch. He refused to be screened, and then he anticipated a ball reversal, and Nate Oates wanted a foul, and it was if anything, it was Alabama fouling Flan, who was first to the ball, and Boogie gets the dunk. And I think if you're going to switch 1 to 5, the way that Flan is just so hard to screen because he's so good at anticipating the screen and staying super close to the ball, which makes you really hard to screen defensively. All of that is just stuff that he does from a technique standpoint that is fantastic. And he's a New York City guard in that respect, that stereotype of tough, gritty, likes to guard, likes the challenge of being on the other team's best guy. And then what he's starting to do is get better at getting into the paint and finishing. And so even though he hasn't made these threes, I'd love to have him make some threes. I'd love it if he made some threes. But he's so good at getting into the paint, distributing to teammates. He's becoming a high assist guy now too. The last two games for Fland are kind of instructive. 8 assists against Alabama, 6 assists against South Carolina, 5 assists against Auburn, 19 assists in the last 3. So starting to do all of that stuff really well. Defending without fouling, which was an issue early in the year. Remember, if he stays on the floor 5 to 7 more minutes against Duke, Florida probably wins. If he stays on the floor 5 to 7 more minutes against UConn, Florida probably wins. So he's improved in that regard in ways that I think are super important. And in Florida, their help side defense was awesome. And it was awesome because they didn't have to overhelp. Like Florida just gives the ability to because of Flan has the ability to front and Lee. They can front well when they switch 1 to 5. So they don't get eaten alive in those mismatches. We saw it happen with Lee against Missouri, and it hasn't really happened to Xavier since. Right? We've seen teams attack Clavsar in that respect. And I think that's still a risk. It's not, by no means is Florida perfect at it. But not a lot of teams can do it the way that Florida can because, again, it kind of starts with Boogie Fland. But Florida's become a disruptive defense, which I think is the biggest change from where Florida was in the non-con, where their shell defense was good. And this we thought was possible with Florida. We thought there was a scenario where Florida had a steal percentage that was 9-10%, and they're at 9.2 now. And, it was 7.8 when they entered league play. So, again, becoming more disruptive and getting easy baskets, that's important because, as we saw with LSU, with Auburn, with Bama, teams are going to pack the paint and try to make it hard for Florida in the half court. And I think Florida getting those easy baskets, embracing that defensive identity is part and parcel how to do it. And then just the Arizona box score numbers. The Gators get 72 in the paint. That was an SEC record. Obviously you can't expect that all the time, but Florida only makes 3 threes. Alabama hits 14 of them. So there's a 33-point difference from beyond the arc, and Florida wins by 23 anyway. Because, again, Florida's shot diet is so good. The way that they're passing the ball now and finding each other. They had 28 assists against South Carolina, and then they come back and they have 20. I think 20. Yeah. They came back and they had 24 assists in this game, 52 assists this week. So they're getting to where, that they're assisting, they're helping, they're getting great looks on the offensive end from inside, and they don't need to worry as much about the threes. And that's kind of been an Arizona formula for Florida. And so that's kind of a concluding thought, I think, when you look at where Florida is as they enter the next 3 games, which we'll preview those Game Time Sidekicks previews. We'll do a Texas A&M preview later in the week, and we'll have one on patreon.com before that. But I want to get to our guest, Blake Lovell, Southeastern 16. But I want to say, in closing, what a job by Todd Golden and this staff. Because after the 5-4 start, it would have been easy to doubt. It would have been easy to listen to some of the people who, Todd missed on Xavier Lee. They missed in the portal bad on these guards. This is not a well-constructed roster. I mean, and these were not just criticisms from sort of the ex-Warriors who make bad criticisms. These were, I saw these from some really, I think, smart basketball people. And they didn't miss on Boogie Flan. He hasn't hit threes, but he's the best defensive guard in the SEC, and they thought he could be. Xavier Lee, they need more from, but we're not hiding from that. He's got to play better. He has had, obviously, the big game against Vanderbilt, the big game against UConn. He's shown it in flashes. He needs to be better than he's been. But they've worked around that, and they've changed their stripes without losing their culture and their identity. And I think part of that is because Florida's culture is so marvelous. Like, you're the defending national champion, and you start 5-4. But I think you could make an argument Todd Golden is the coach of the year if Bucky McMillan didn't exist, because the players have embraced what Todd Golden said they need to be, an elite top 10, top 5 defensive team. And they've done it despite personal struggles. Xavier Lee has defended better than he has at any point in time on film in his career, despite not making shots. They've done it despite adversity and noise. Alex Condon's a preseason All-American. He can't hit the broadside of a barn from deep. No matter. Leading the team in defensive win shares, leading the team in assists, averaging 13 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 assists a game. You'd take that from any big man in America. I've said that before. It's true. Tommy Houck is maybe the only guy that, from a preseason expectation standpoint, I think people would say, oh, he's met his expectations. And it doesn't, that can lead to acrimony in a locker room. And instead, Florida has just embraced who they are. And so now they've won 2 SEC games by 70 points in a week. They go into their bye week ahead of a huge game against A&M for SEC leadership. And I think a lot of this is just culture, and it's Todd Golden's belief in his players and Carlin Hartman's belief in his bigs and Jonathan Sapphire's insistence on winning on the margins and Corey McRae and Torian Green's ability to develop the backcourt, how, the Urban Clavsar, playmaking. He doesn't just have to shoot a 3. He can beat you off the dribble. He could finish. He could finish through contact, which he couldn't do last year. That's coaching and development. And that's why this staff, I think, is the best in the league right now. Maybe they missed a little on Xavier Lee from what they thought he would be, but they've gotten him to continue to impact winning when it's been needed. And, they are coaching their rear ends off without ever losing belief in their guys. And so here they have an opportunity to maybe win the SEC, be a protected seed in Tampa. There are 3 really tough games ahead, all of which will be in Quad 1A. Right now, Kentucky is in there in the home game too. So, people talk about the kind of paucity that Florida has of Quad 1 wins. Quad 1A wins, they just have 1. They could come out of this with 3. If they go 2-1 in this next 3, you got to feel pretty good about their chances to win the SEC, especially if they win Saturday at A&M. And A&M is at Alabama Wednesday night and then has a short rest and prep for the Gators. The Gators get the long prep against A&M, which is good for reasons we'll talk about on our previous show and a little bit with Blake Lovell, about why the Aggies are good, kind of getting into that and transition into our guy, Blake Lovell, y'all.